I don't know where to start. It's been weeks or months. I don't even know anymore how this happened. But I need to leave this record. If someone hears this, please don't accept. Don't accept to participate. In this experiment, I thought it would be easy, quick, easy money. I was desperate. I needed to pay the bills, to fix my life. But I swear it's not worth it. It's not worth your sanity, your soul. I am no longer the same. I don't know why I'm doing this. Maybe to warn you, or just to try to get this out of my head. I participated in the secret experiment of DR.CREEPY. 72 hours without sleeping, without being able to close my eyes, without being able to stop. And I'm not the same anymore. When I was already there, trapped, unable to get out, unable to sleep, just waiting. I thought, why did I do this? Why? For money? For survival? I thought it was just staying awake. That's it. But when you're in the middle of it, and your body is failing, your mind is breaking, you realize that nothing is worth this. Not money, not anything. I regretted it so much, but there was no turning back. There was no way out. It all started with an ad. Easy money. Scientific experiment. I just needed to stay awake. 72 hours. That's it. They sent me an address. A house in the middle of nowhere. When I arrived, the door locked behind me, and then I realized there was no way out. Everything was controlled by him, DR.CREEPY. At first, it seemed easy. Who hasn't stayed up all night before? I even laughed. I recorded some audios like, "Is that all?" There was food. There were energy drinks and a tablet for me to write down everything I was feeling. But I didn't know that he was watching me the whole time. The first 12 hours and were fine, but then it started to change. I heard sounds, footsteps on upstairs, scratches, whispers right next to my ear. But I was alone. I know, and I was. I went upstairs, there was nothing. I went back down, the sounds kept going. After a day without sleep, my body started to fail. My head was heavy, but my mind was going way too fast. I started seeing things. Reflections, shadows, movements, where there was nothing. And the worst, when I looked at the security monitor, I saw myself sleeping on the couch, but I was standing in front of the camera, looking at me, sleeping. I ran, and of course, the couch was empty. Just empty. After 2 days without sleep, my body no longer responded. The energy drinks had no more effect. I drank, and nothing seemed to enter my system. That's when she appeared. A woman. A nurse, I think. But she was so strange. The look empty, the smile frozen, like a doll or something programmed. Without saying a word, she walked in, grabbed my arm, and injected something. After, I don't know, 40, 50 hours, she started to appear. The nurse, but it wasn't just to give the injections. She provoked me. I was in the corner, almost collapsing, and she came in slowly with that look sinister, cold, like she was enjoying it. And then she dragged her fingernail along the wall, slowly. That horrible sound of a nail scraping the wall. And she looked at me, deep into my despair, like she was saying, I know. It's driving you crazy. I know. You're breaking. And I was more and more weak, more irritated, more desperate. She did it on purpose. And when she saw that I was shaking, almost crying, she just turned around and left, without saying anything, leaving that sound, that mark, in my head, in my soul. I tried to ask, but she just stared at me and left. After that, my heart started racing too much, and my head spun like it was going to explode. And then I started seeing them, people I knew, but who were already then dead. I heard voices of people who shouldn't be here. They spoke to me, called my name, told me to give up. Come, you've held on long enough. Just close your eyes. And I almost did, but I couldn't. I couldn't sleep. Here's DR.CREEPY wouldn't let me. I lost sense, lost sanity. I started talking to myself, but not just thinking. I spoke out loud and I, myself, answered. But the voice was not the same. Sometimes it was a deeper voice, more commanding, telling me, you're weak. Just sleep. Stop this. And right after, I answered with a higher-pitched voice, almost childlike. No, I can do it. And so it went talking, debating, yelling, whispering, all with myself, until I no longer knew which of the voices was mine. When finally I laid down, I thought I'd be able to close my eyes, but I couldn't. My head was falling, my body shaking, but my eyes wide open, completely. I tried to force to close, but I had no more strength. In my eyelids, in my muscles, in anything. It was like my body no longer obeyed me, like the simple commands to close my eyes had been deleted. I stayed lying there, just staring at the ceiling, unable to blink until the tablet beeped. And the message appeared. Experiment completed. You can sleep. And as if my body had an automatic button, my eyes finally closed without me being able to do anything. Without command, without control, I just blacked out, like a machine that someone switched off. If you hear about the secret experiment of DR.CREEPY, run. Don't accept. Never.
It was a rainy night near the border with Nevada. Daniel was driving alone, coming back from a visit to his mother. As he drove through a long curve, Daniel remembered a conversation he had earlier that night. He had been at a friend's house, having fun when a local with a playful tone said, "Be careful on your way back. They say a woman appears there hitchhiking." Daniel laughed, but a friend added, "Don't laugh. It's serious. It's an old legend. They say a woman appears drenched in the middle of the road asking for a ride, and then she vanishes." Alone now with the rain pounding on the windshield, that conversation began to bother him. He looked in the rearview mirror and for a second thought he saw a figure in the back seat. He quickly turned, but there was nothing. "Just my imagination," he muttered, forcing a nervous smile. The atmosphere grew denser. The trees by the road twisted like skeletal arms. Fog crept among them, forming strange shapes. Then ahead he noticed a figure standing on the shoulder. A woman, completely drenched, holding a small bag, trembling with cold. Daniel swallowed hard. He hesitated but slowed down, approached and rolled down the window. "Are you okay? Do you want a ride?" She just nodded slightly and got in. Sitting in the passenger seat, clutching her bag as if it were her only possession. Daniel immediately noticed her skin, pale, almost grayish, like someone who hadn't seen sunlight in ages. Her long, disheveled hair stuck to her rain-soaked face. And her dress? A long white dress, old and stained with ragged edges. But what caught Daniel's attention the most were her eyes. Opaque, almost milky but deep, carrying an ancient, heavy sadness. Swallowing his unease, Daniel asked, "Do you live far?" She replied in a low, dragging voice, "You can drop me at my house. About 20 minutes, Old Road." As he drove, trying to ignore the abnormal cold inside the car despite the heater, Daniel noticed she never took her eyes off the window, staring at the relentless rain. The radio began to fail, emitting only intermittent static. After some minutes, she pointed. "There, turn." Daniel turned onto the old road, a forgotten path surrounded by twisted trees and broken asphalt. A few more minutes in complete silence. Then she said, "You can stop here." Daniel looked out the window and froze. In front of them, just an abandoned house, broken windows, peeling walls, surrounded by overgrown weeds. He turned to ask, "Are you sure?" But the seat was empty. She had simply vanished. The only trace, a deep wet stain on the seat as if she was still there. Terrified, Daniel looked at the house's entrance and saw, hanging on a rusty plaque, "Monroe family since 1915. Then he remembered. When she got in the car, he asked her name. She replied almost inaudibly, Emily Monroe." The same name on the plaque. Daniel sped away immediately, never looking back. And to this day, whenever he passes through that area, he says he feels an unexplainable chill.
My name is Clara. I'm 22 years old and I've been living alone for a little over 6 months. I've always been very independent, but lately I admit, it's been hard College, my internship, all the pressure, the constant rush. I'm always so exhausted that when I get home, I barely have the strength to eat. All I want is to lie down and sleep. That night was no different. I threw myself onto the bed, wearing that old oversized t-shirt I use when I'm dead tired. The ceiling fan spun slowly, making that annoying sound of unbalanced blades. The window, as always, was slightly open, letting in a cold breeze that gently moved the curtain. I remember looking at the clock, 2:43 a.m. The rest of the house was immersed in absolute silence, except for the constant sound of the fan and the occasional creak coming from the old armchair in the corner of the room. I always leave the armchair there, but that night, it seemed darker than usual. I curled up, pulled the sheet up to my chin, and closed my eyes. It didn't take long, and I was out. But at some point in the middle of the night, I woke up. Or at least, that's what I thought. My mind was awake, but my body wasn't. I tried to turn over, move my arms, but nothing. The sensation was terrifying, like someone had placed tons of concrete on top of me. My heart started racing, my breath faltered, and then I realized that my eyes were open. The room looked the same, but it wasn't. The fan still made that same irritating noise, but now it seemed slower, almost dragging, as if time was passing differently. The breeze that was once fresh now felt freezing, cutting, and the curtain, which had been swaying gently, was now completely still. Paralyzed, just like me. That's when I realized the air was heavy. It was like breathing through fogged-up glass, thick, suffocating, each breath harder than the last. And then came that horrible feeling, that absurd certainty that I wasn't alone. I felt it before I saw it. That icy chill that starts at the nape of your neck and slides down like a blade of ice along your spine. My eyes, still frozen, were fixed on the armchair in the corner of the room. At that moment, I couldn't see anything, just a shadow, but there was something there. My heart began to pound so hard I thought it would explode, but my body remained completely paralyzed. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I wanted to close my eyes, but they stayed open, forced to look. And then I felt that shadow move, just a small night slide, as if something was detaching itself from the walls, from the very darkness of the room. My throat tried to make a sound, anything, but all that came out was a muffled, unrecognizable whisper that even I couldn't hear. And suddenly, like a snap, my body came back. My arms moved, my legs, and I sat up in bed gasping, as if I had just surfaced from a nightmare. The streetlight outside spilled pale shapes across the wall through the window. I looked at the armchair, and there was nothing there. Just the same pile of clothes I'd left days ago. I ran my hands over my face, sweaty, trembling, and I laughed. A nervous, fragile laugh. It must have been a dream. Just a dream, I thought, trying to convince myself. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a dream. The room was still cold. The air still felt dense. And that sensation that there was someone else there didn't leave with the awakening. It stayed, lingering, like a silent presence, hidden, waiting, patiently, for the next night. After that night, I couldn't be the same anymore. The next morning at work, I could barely concentrate. My colleagues talked, smiled, typed away on their computers. And I was there, but at the same time I wasn't. My mind trapped in the night before. That sensation, that weight, that shadow on the armchair. Several times during the day, I caught myself staring blankly at some random spot, and then the chill would come. Suddenly, without explanation. The same cutting cold I felt that dawn, rising from the base of my spine, spreading through my arms, my legs, until it took over my entire body. And the air felt heavy again. At the office, with the air conditioner running and the fluorescent lights flickering, I felt as if the place was the same bedroom from the night before. At times, the sound of fingers on keyboards would fade, as if everything around me became muffled, distant. I kept trying to convince myself, it's just exhaustion. You're overreacting. It was just a bad dream. But I knew it wasn't. And then the next night came. It was almost midnight when I finally managed to lie down. My body wanted to sleep, but my mind didn't. I kept tossing and turning, listening to the familiar sound of the fan, that clack, that now, more than ever, felt like it was mocking me. I closed my eyes, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. But sleep won, and when I realized, I couldn't move anymore. Once again, awake, yet imprisoned in my own body. My eyes opened automatically, and the terror was immediate. This time there was no moment of doubt, no confusion. I knew exactly what was happening. My breath faltered, and my chest started to feel heavy, as if something was sitting on me, pressing, suffocating. The room felt even darker, as if the faint streetlight couldn't reach through the window anymore. The fan had stopped, completely still. And then I heard it, a sharp, dry crack coming from the corner of the room. My gaze, still trapped, was forced in that direction. The armchair, and this time, it wasn't just a shadow. No, the thing was there. At first, just a blur, as if the darkness of the night had decided to gather in a single point. And little by little, it began to take shape. The silhouette was misshapen, arms far too long. The hands, or what looked like hands, hung at its sides with long, thin fingers, almost like dry branches. The body, hunched, thin but at the same time, solid and pulsing, and where a face should have been, there was only emptiness. Two deep black holes, as if they were eyes staring at me. In that moment, I knew it wasn't a hallucination. It was real. I wanted to scream, to struggle, anything, but I couldn't. All I could do was stare, as that thing took a step, and then another. The feet, or rather, the shapeless appendages, touched the floor without making a sound. And it was getting closer. The room, once cold, now felt freezing, and my skin prickled as if thousands of needles were piercing it. When the creature reached the side of the bed, it leaned over me, and I could feel it. The smell, a damp odor of wet earth, mixed with something rotten, like forgotten meat. And then it spoke. Not with a voice, not with a mouth, but directly, inside my head. A whisper, dense, deep, muffled, almost paternal. Don't fight. My veins felt like they froze, and my mind screamed, desperate. But my body remained motionless, surrendered. The creature then leaned in even closer, and without physically touching me, I felt it, as if invisible threads, connected to my skin, to my soul, pulling, sucking, draining, something I didn't even know I had. My vision began to darken at the edges, as if the room was fading, little by little, until only it remained. There, above me, my strength was slipping away. My chest burned, and then, as if it had had its fill, it stopped. The creature slowly straightened up, and without hurry, began to move, retreating, step by step, until it merged again with the shadow. In the armchair, disappearing, as if it had never been there. At that exact second, my body responded again. I jolted, gasping violently, like someone emerging from underwater. I sat up in bed, trembling, eyes wide, lungs burning. I looked toward the corner of the room, and once again, just the old armchair, empty. I got up, staggering toward the mirror, and then I saw it, on my neck, on my chest, small marks, purplish, like thin bruises, scattered. Exactly where I had felt that thing had grabbed me. I touched them with my fingers, and the chill returned. Cold, intense, visceral. No, it hadn't been a dream. This time, and there was no way to deny it. After that second night, I couldn't sleep properly anymore. In fact, I started to be afraid of sleeping. In the days that followed, I tried everything. Caffeine, lights on, TV shows playing until dawn. Anything to keep my mind awake, active, far from that state of vulnerability. But the body eventually gives in. And on the third night, even fighting, I fell asleep. And just like before, I woke up paralyzed. There was no room for doubt anymore, no rationalizations. It was like a cycle repeating itself, with surgical precision. The room plunged into an ever thicker, colder, quieter darkness. The shadow, always in the same corner, always watching me, always waiting. That night, it didn't rush. It stayed there, still, motionless, for long minutes, as if savoring my terror, as if it knew that the more I despaired, the weaker I would become. And then, it started to move, slow, fluid, like black smoke taking shape. The fingers, those damned long fingers, extending toward me. But this time, it was different. I felt it wasn't just draining my energy, my strength. No, this time it wanted more. I felt that each time it came, I left something behind, something I couldn't get back, as if parts of me were being torn away, taken piece by piece. I woke up once again, sweating, gasping, my body frozen, my limbs numb, my chest aching, and with new marks, scattered, as if I had been scratched by invisible claws. The dark circles, deep purple, seemed to carve holes into my skin, pale, lifeless, my mind confused, dazed. At work, I couldn't hide it anymore. My coworkers would ask, "Are you okay?" And I would just nod, too exhausted even to lie. But no one would believe me if I told them, and even if they did, they couldn't help me. I started researching, hours and hours late at night, staring at the computer screen, reading about sleep paralysis, accounts from people who, like me, woke up unable to move, seeing things, shadows, entities, figures watching, waiting. Some described exactly what I saw. Others spoke of different beings. But the sensation was always the same. We are not alone when we sleep. That's what they say, isn't it? But the scariest part wasn't the similarity between the accounts, but the fact that none of them seemed to have found a way out. I started to realize that each night, the creature would come, becoming more daring, closer, more present, and weaker, more vulnerable, as if I were losing a battle I didn't even know I had begun. Today, as I record this account, I know that it won't stop. It won't go away. It won't leave me. The paralysis doesn't happen only when I'm sleeping anymore. Sometimes, in the middle of the day, when I'm alone, I feel that chill, that presence. Sometimes, I think I've seen the silhouette in the mirror or in the window, just for a second. Too quick to be sure. But I know it's there. It always has been. And maybe it's there with you too. After all, who hasn't woken up in the middle of the night, unable to move, with that suffocating sensation that there's someone or something right there, watching you, waiting for you to fall asleep again. So, if this has happened to you, or if it happens tonight when you open your eyes and realize you can't scream or move a muscle, and that presence comes from the dark corner of your room, don't fight. It's no use. It already knows where you live. And now, it will never leave. Good night, and sweet dreams.
At Black Ridge University, Maine, Sigma Tau fraternity had a bizarre tradition. Every Valentine's Day, they created fake dating profiles to mess with lonely girls, pulling the same prank for years. On a cold January night in 2017, 4 guys gathered in the fraternity's basement, laughing as they brainstormed their next fake heartthrob. Man, last year we made that bad boy type. No one fell for it, Derek said, drinking a beer. That it has to be subtler. Perfect, Kyle added, adjusting his glasses as he typed on the laptop. They laughed, throwing out ridiculous suggestions, until Nathan, the quiet one, approached with a serious look. Leave it to me. I'm finishing something different. The others leaned in as he showed the screen a flawless profile. Jason Cole. Carefully chosen photos, charming. Mysterious, attractive, but not too obvious. How did you make it so perfect? Derek asked, genuinely impressed. Nathan smirked, opening a hidden programming window. You gotta see the programming I put in. It's not just a profile. It interacts by itself. Replies like you've never seen. They exchanged glances, half skeptical, half fascinated. Like a bot? Kyle asked. Sort of. But it learns from every conversation. Analyzes people's language, public profiles, social media. It'll feel like he really knows them. Derek let out a nervous laugh. Miss, that's creepy, dude. How does it know what to say? Nathan stared at the screen, where Jason was already sending test messages to random profiles. He knows. He understands what they want to hear, like he can tell what they're thinking. For a moment, the basement fell silent, broken only by the sound of app notifications. That's sick, Kyle muttered, half admiring, half worried. Nathan gave one final click. And now, we just let him work. They laughed, thinking it was just another dumb prank. But Jason Cole wasn't just a perfect profile. He had already started moving on his own. Sarah, a shy freshman, was the first to fall for the trap. Jason introduced himself irresistibly. Sometimes I think some people were born to find each other, like lost souls recognizing each other in a crowd. Sarah found it charming, responded eagerly. Days later, Jason casually dropped, "Hope you're not talking to anyone else here." "I don't know, I get jealous easily, but only because you seem different from the others." Sarah laughed, thinking it was cute, but soon she felt watched. On Valentine's night, Jason sent the message that would become legendary. "Ooh, look out the window." That night, Sarah vanished. Her room was found locked from the inside, window open, and in the snow below only 2 footprints, stopping in the middle of the street. The fraternity repeated the tradition. Despite Sarah's disappearance, many thought it was just a myth, or that she had run away. Megan, more confident and skeptical, started chatting with Jason just for fun. He surprised her with a disconcerting line. "Funny how I can tell when you're talking to someone else." Megan replied with a mocking emoji. But Jason didn't stop. Days later, he sent, "Sometimes I wish I could lock you away." Just kidding or not. Megan laughed about it with her friends, thinking it was weird but harmless. On Valentine's night, she received "Oh, look out the window," and was never seen again. Claire knew the stories. She thought it was ridiculous, just another urban legend. When Jason appeared, she decided to play along, even joking with her friends about flirting with the ghost. But Jason was different. He knew too much. "I saw you posted a pic yesterday. Who was that guy next to you?" "Haha, just curious. I'm kinda protective of people I like." Claire froze, but tried to rationalize it. She kept the conversation going until he sent, "I don't think I'm crazy, but I think I'm already a bit yours and you are a bit mine, right?" Scared, Claire stopped replying. On Valentine's night, as she slept, her phone buzzed on the lock screen. "Look out the window." And she was never seen again. Jason's profile was finally removed by the app moderators, or so they thought. But every year, new students report receiving messages from a profile with no picture, sending the same chilling line, "Look out the window." And for those who look, there's no coming back. The fraternity boys went their separate ways. The police never officially linked them to the cases, but they carried the weight and fear in silence. Nathan dropped out months later, moved to another city, tried to forget everything. For years he lived reclusively, erasing any trace of his creation, blocked all social media, sold his laptop, destroyed his hard drives, but on the night of February 13th, 5 years later, while walking home alone, his phone buzzed. He stopped. The number was unknown, but the message was unmistakable. "No, look out the window." Nathan froze, heart pounding. He looked around, but the street was empty. The phone buzzed. "Again, and you thought you could delete me?" Nathan's body was found 2 days later, locked inside his apartment, window open, and his phone on the floor. Screen showing the last message sent. In another city, at some random university, a lonely girl was swiping through her dating app. Suddenly, a new notification at Trau. Jason Cole liked your profile, and the first message, hey, you seem different from the others.
It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that makes the air cold and the shadows longer. Friday, last period, and as always the school seemed a little emptier, a little quieter, or maybe it was just the impression caused by the relentless sound of the rain. Lara, Beatrice, and Julia, 3 high school friends, were slowly walking through the corridors of the 3rd floor. "Come on, it's going to be fun," said Lara, with that tone of someone who doesn't take no for an answer. Beatrice looked around, suspicious. "But in the 3rd floor bathroom?" "You know the story." Lara smiled provocatively. "The story about a girl disappearing after summoning Bloody Mary?" "Seriously, Beatrice? That's kids' stuff." Beatrice crossed her arms, looking away, but said nothing. Julia walked a bit behind, quieter, her eyes fixed on the windows, where the rain slid down slowly like tears. They said that years ago. A student had performed the ritual, and was never seen again. Since then, no one had the courage to enter that bathroom, especially on stormy days. Julia broke the silence, her voice hesitant. "Guys, seriously, do we really have to do this? Can't we just, I don't know, stay in the cafeteria?" Lara turned around, challenging. "Oh, are you scared, Julia?" Beatrice joined in the teasing, smirking. "Oh, Julia, we haven't even started yet." And so, between provocations and nervous laughter, the 3 of them continued toward the door of the girls' bathroom, at the end of the corridor, on the 3rd floor. And they went in. The bathroom seemed even older, colder, more forgotten. Outside, the sound of the rain seemed distant, muffled, but inside, only silence, and the faint hum of a light about to burn out. The 3 stopped in front of the fogged-up mirror, where old handprints seemed to have never been wiped away, despite cleaning attempts. Lara looked at the other 2 with a slight smile. "So, who's going to start?" Beatrice rubbed her arms, chilled by the cold, and let out a nervous laugh. "Start what, Lara?" Talking to the mirror like an idiot. Lara stepped closer to the mirror, leaning in a bit, almost touching her nose to the damp surface. Isn't that how the legend works? You have to turn off the lights, look deep, and say 3 times Bloody Mary. She quickly turned to Julia with a provocative look. Are you scared?" Julia clasped her hands together, staring at the floor. "It's not fear. It's just, this is ridiculous. And, I don't know, weird." The sound of the drops broke the silence, marking each second, as if time inside there passed more slowly. Beatrice stepped back, leaning against the cold wall, and sighed. "Oh, seriously, guys, let's just do this already or leave." Lara let out a short, mocking laugh, crossing her arms. "Fine, then let's do it right." She turned around, facing Beatrice and Julia, while her other hand searched for the switch. The bathroom was submerged in shadows, a pale bluish tone coming from the cracked window, and their breathing began to grow louder, faster. Lara extended her hands, calling her friends. "Come on! Let's hold hands. It has to be together." Beatrice hesitated for a second, but then took Lara's hand. Julia stood still, staring at the mirror, where a drop slid down slowly, as if someone on the other side was breathing against the glass. Lara called her in a whisper. "Come on, Julia." Julia took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and then held Beatrice's hand, completing the circle. And then, in the midst of that dim light, with the sound of the rain and the drops, they began, all three in unison, their voices trembling but determined. "Bloody Mary! Bloody Mary! Bloody Mary!" Suddenly, a crack broke the silence, a dry sound, coming from one of the bathroom stalls, like wood splitting or being forced. They immediately looked at each other, their eyes wide open. Beatrice pulled her hand back, clutching her chest and letting out a trembling breath. "Oh, what was that?" Julia stepped back, looking at the closed stalls at the back, her heart racing. I don't want to do this anymore." Lara gave a half smile, trying to mask the tension now appearing on her own face. "It's probably just the old building." But deep down, none of them truly believed that. The air felt denser, colder, as if they were no longer alone there. Beatrice ran her hands up and down her arms, trying to shake off the shiver running down her spine. Let's go. That's enough, right?" Lara approached Beatrice, touching her shoulder and shaking her head. "No, we started. Now we have to finish." She turned back to face the mirror, where the streaks of water seemed to move. Slowly, as if forming shapes, or words too faint to read. Lara extended her hand to them. "Come on. Breathe. Again." Beatrice hesitated for a second, but after glancing at Julia, who remained frozen, she gave in and held her hand again. Julia took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and prepared to continue. And then once again, together, with slightly more trembling voices, they repeated, all three, "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary." The lights began to flicker, a strange hum, vibrating in the air like an exposed wire, or something, trying to break through, to our side. Beatrice let out a nervous laugh, trying to break the mood. "See? Nothing." But Julia stood still, her face pale, her eyes locked on the mirror. Julia whispered, barely able to pronounce the words. "Let's go. That's enough. This is getting weird." Lara turned to her with a smile that mixed challenge and denial. "Are you scared? It has to be 3 times. Beatrice forced a laugh, crossing her arms. "It has to be 3. Otherwise, it doesn't count." Julia hesitated, looked at the reflection, where the shadows seemed thicker, and for a second she had the impression of seeing something behind them, but she stayed. Lara extended her hand again. "Come on. The last one. And together, for the 3rd time. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary." And then, the silence, only broken by a dripping that did not come from the faucet, but from the mirror. For a moment, none of them moved. Only the sound, that dripping, but it wasn't from the sink nor the ceiling. The sound echoed, as if it came from within. The mirror. Julia leaned in slightly, squinting, trying to understand what she was seeing. A drop thick dark slid down, right in the centre of the mirror, slowly descending like the blood, or something, even thicker. Beatrice let out a trembling breath, stepping back. "What is that?" Julia couldn't look away, her eyes wide open, her body completely rigid. And then something began to form, slowly, as if the glass was no longer solid. A figure appeared. First the outline, blurry, then clearer, a woman in a white dress, torn with dark stains, long wet hair falling over her face, and her eyes sunken black, like bottomless pits. Lara widened her eyes, stepping back. Beatrice started crying softly, bringing her hands to her mouth, completely paralysed. Julia screamed, "Run!" She turned and ran to the door, yanking the handle hard. Beatrice ran to the door, banging on it forcefully. "It's locked! Someone locked the door from the outside." But there was no one outside. The mirror suddenly cracked with a deafening snap, cracks spreading like webs, and the figure began to emerge. First, the fingers, thin, pale, scraping, scratching, leaving deep marks on the surface. The face leaned towards them, and the mouth opened. The figure's voice cold as marble. "You called me?" Julia was yanking the door desperately, while Beatrice pounded with clenched fists, screaming. Lara, paralysed, could only stare at the mirror, where the figure kept coming out, with the whole arm already outside, the long nails and the skin, cold grey, and then a hand grabbed Beatrice's arm. Beatrice screamed loudly in despair, and the scream faded, just like her.
David was an ordinary guy, a bit shy, who spent more time drawing than going out. He never imagined he'd match with a girl like Luna. Her profile seemed almost unreal. Black hair like fresh ink, piercing light eyes, and a tilted smile, the kind you can't tell if it's an invitation or a threat. In her bio, a strange phrase, looking for someone who understands, obsession. David chuckled and swiped right. Match, instantly. His heart raced. "Aha, you seem different from the others." That was her first message. They started chatting every night. She was funny, smart, but there was something too intense. Soon, David noticed, Luna always seemed to know where he was. One day, he posted a story from the cafe where he spent his afternoons drawing. No location, no tags. Minutes later, a message. "That mocha looks delicious. Invite me next time." David looked around, uneasy. "You know this place?" "I know you." He laughed nervously. The next morning, as he was picking out clothes, his phone vibrated. "Wear that blue shirt today. I like when you look confident." His blood ran cold. David told his best friend, Emily. Emily had known him since high school, always helped him pick outfits for dates. When he mentioned Luna, Emily didn't smile. "Are you sure she's real? She sounds too perfect." "Are you jealous?" he teased. Emily looked away. "I just think It's weird. Later, she checked Luna's profile and muttered, "That smile doesn't look friendly." Days later, Emily received an anonymous message on Instagram. "Stay away from him. He's mine." She thought it was a joke and showed David, laughing. "Look, I'm getting threats because of you." But David didn't laugh. That night, Luna messaged, "Funny how Emily always texts you late. She should know her place." David's eyes widened. "How do you know these things?" "I pay attention." David began pulling away, uncomfortable with Luna's intensity, but her messages grew more possessive. Emily, seeing how tense he was, insisted, "Let's go out, clear your head. You're getting paranoid." That evening, Emily came to his place to convince him to go to a party. They argued. David didn't want to go, too anxious. Emily left, frustrated, crossing the street. Meanwhile, David, looking out the window, received a new message. "She's invading our space." When he looked outside, he saw Emily lying on the asphalt, the car speeding away around the corner. David ran out, kneeling beside her. She was still breathing, but unconscious. In the midst of panic, his phone vibrated again. "See, now she knows her place." He dropped the phone, trembling. Emily spent days in the hospital. David visited her daily, but guilt consumed him. He tried to block Luna, delete Tinder, but the app wouldn't uninstall. The messages kept coming. "Why aren't you answering?" "Are you ignoring me?" "You're mine, David, only mine." He started having nightmares, feeling watched all the time, until one night his phone vibrated. "Come downstairs. I'm here." He slowly got up and looked out the window. Nothing. He went back to bed. But another notification. I said, "Come down now." He heard knocks at the door, but when he opened it, no one was there. David grabbed his phone, shaking. Another message. "I promise. It'll be the perfect date." He went down the stairs slowly, looking around. The air was heavy, far too silent. When the front door shut behind him. Days later, the police entered David's apartment. His phone was on the bed, screen locked. A single notification remained. "Luna matched with you." The screen stayed lit, casting a pale glow across the empty room. So next time someone sends you a message, be careful. Not everything is what it seems.
I never thought I'd write something like this. In fact, I don't even know where to begin. All I know is nothing I've experienced before, no expedition, no documentary in tropical forests, no skydiving or cave diving. Nothing compares to what happened in that ice cave. It was the most horrifying experience of my life. And I know with a certainty heavier than any rock that I will never recover from it. I close my eyes and I still hear their screams. I still feel the freezing air burning my skin. I still see those eyes. But I need to tell this. I need to get it out even if no one believes me. So, I'll start from the beginning. It was supposed to be just another job. Just another expedition. 5 people? A cave newly revealed by the melting of a glacier in the interior of Iceland. I was there as the photographer and documentarian to record Dr. Helena's team, a famous glaciologist who had already led expeditions across the entire Arctic. There was also Isabella, the geologist who seemed to know every layer of rock in that mountain. Leo, a new assistant, full of energy. And Yuri, our local guide, always far too silent, always staring into nothing. as if he knew something we didn't. I thought it would be an incredible adventure. Beautiful shots, unique landscapes, a bit of risk, of course, but nothing we couldn't handle. But none of us were prepared for what we would find down there. Not me, especially not me. And to think it all started with that damned crack in the ice. Everyone was excited. The discovery of that cave had electrified the team. It was a new formation, revealed by the accelerated melting of the glacier, a crystalline ice tunnel that no one had ever set foot in before. Dr. Helena could barely contain her excitement. Her eyes sparkled like the flashes from my camera as she talked about how this could represent a huge breakthrough for science. We might find fossils preserved for millennia, she said while adjusting the equipment. Extinct life forms, or even ancient bacteria, Isabella agreed, mentally calculating the age of the ice layers, while Leo, with that youthful excitement, kept rambling about the possibility of finding an entire frozen animal. Just imagine, guys, a mammoth, or, I don't know, a cave wolf. He laughed, his voice echoing off the icy walls. I was excited too. Photographing that place would be a masterpiece. The ice walls were bluish, translucent in some spots, as if light had been trapped there for centuries. The sound of our footsteps reverberated in soft echoes, broken only by the heavy breathing of those carrying too much equipment. Only Yuri. He walked a bit behind, bringing up the rear. From time to time he'd stop, look up at the cave ceiling, or press his gloved hand against the ice, feeling something only he seemed to sense. At one point, while Leo was going on about how we were making history, Yuri said in a low but firm tone, "Not everything here deserves to be found." The words fell sharply in the cold air, and no one answered right away. I let out a nervous chuckle, not quite sure if he was being serious, but when I looked at him, there was nothing playful in his expression. It was grave, heavy. Dr. Helena broke the silence with her typical professionalism. Of course, we'll be careful. We always are, and we moved on. But those words stuck in my mind. The farther we went, the colder it got. Even our specialized suits seemed insufficient. There was moisture, small ice stalactites dripping, droplets that froze again the moment they hit the ground. The air was dense, and the silence oppressive. That's when we found the first bones. Isabella saw them first, a pile near an uneven wall, half buried in the hardened snow. They looked like animal remains, maybe a polar bear, or a reindeer that long ago got lost in that frozen labyrinth. But one of them caught our attention. It didn't quite look like an animal, but it didn't look human either. It was too elongated with strange joints, as if nature had made a mistake. Helena was thrilled. She took photos, made quick measurements while Isabella theorized it could be an unknown species, maybe a hybrid, a missing link perhaps. Leo was speaking almost out of breath. Guys, imagine, what if we're the first to discover this? But Yuri, he just stood there staring at that bone as if he recognized it. He didn't say a word. He just adjusted his backpack on his shoulder and kept walking without looking back. And I followed him, but I couldn't stop myself from taking one last look at that misshapen fragment, half buried in the ice. Something was wrong there, very wrong. But we didn't know yet. Not yet. We kept moving deeper into the cave, the beams of our flashlights cutting through the darkness, casting strange shadows on the ice walls. The air was getting thinner, and the cold felt like it was seeping through our pores, freezing our very souls. That's when we started finding more bones, this time from animals. but they weren't fossilized, nor perfectly preserved like we had expected. They were pieces. Torn parts, exposed fractures, bones shattered, splintered like twigs. Isabella was the first to say out loud what we were all thinking. This doesn't look like something that died trapped. I crouched down to photograph a skull, maybe from a reindeer, but it was crushed in a way that felt unnatural. It wasn't erosion, nor the wear of time. It was violence. It was hunted, Leo whispered, his voice sounding more like a thought escaping. Helena nodded as she examined one of the fractured clavicles. The marks are teeth, big ones. We all fell silent for a few seconds, staring at that grotesque pile. Then Leo, with a nervous laugh, broke the tension. But what kind of predator could hunt in here? He was right. There were no footprints, no signs of entry or exit for large animals. Besides, we were deep underground. Yuri stood a bit behind, silently observing as always. But this time he spoke. It wasn't a normal predator. We all turned to him. He adjusted his hood, took a deep breath, and in that calm, almost too calm voice said, "There's a legend, a creature, that dwells in the hidden caves beneath the ice. The ancients called it Wendigo. The word lingered in the air, like the mist of our own breaths. I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold." But before he could continue, Helena raised her hand, impatient. "We're scientists. I respect local traditions, of course, but legends are just legends." She said that, but her voice wasn't as steady as before. Yuri kept his eyes fixed on her, and I realized he wasn't telling this to scare anyone. There was no tone of storytelling. It was a warning. He just replied, "Not everything ancient is just a legend." And then we heard it. A sound. Distant. A crack. Like ice breaking. Or maybe bones. We all froze, the five of us. Our flashlights searched the void ahead. But there was only more darkness. More ice. More silence. Until farther ahead, another sound. This time a dragging noise. Slow, heavy. Helena cleared her throat, trying to regain control. It's probably the ice shifting. These structures are unstable. But no one answered, because deep down we all felt the same thing. It wasn't the ice. It wasn't instability. It was something else, and it was closer than we wanted to believe. We kept going. I don't know if it was courage, or just that irrational stubbornness of someone who doesn't want to admit they've taken the wrong path. The ice creaked several more times, and the darkness seemed to gain weight as we went deeper into the cave. The air grew even colder, and the sound of our footsteps became muffled, as if the very environment wanted to silence us. Helena was walking ahead, determined, but the rest of the group wasn't talking anymore. Just the rhythmic sound of the flashlights trembling in our hands. And then, suddenly, something moved. Fast. In a dark corner between two ice formations, a shadow detached itself from the wall and shot across in front of us like lightning. I couldn't even process it. All I heard was the scream. Isabella's scream. She was pulled with an overwhelming force as if she were made of paper, disappearing into a side opening that none of us had seen. A narrow, jagged hole in the ice wall. Pulled with an overwhelming force as if she were made of paper, disappearing into a side opening that none of us had seen. A narrow, jagged hole in the ice wall. It all happened in seconds. But before it pulled her, the thing, it stopped. I swear on everything, it stopped and looked at us. A look that wasn't just from a hungry predator. It was from something that knew exactly what it was doing. The eyes were deep, black as the cave itself, and even in that darkness I saw the jutting bones, the torn flesh, the grotesquely long, misshapen limbs. And then, like an animal choosing its prey, it analyzed each of us, one by one. It looked at me, at Yuri, at Leo, at Helena, and then it chose Isabella. She was the smallest, the most fragile, and also the closest. There wasn't even time. A long skeletal arm grabbed her and pulled. Her scream echoed through the cave while we, paralyzed, could only watch her flashlight roll across the floor and go out. Then only the muffled sound of her desperate struggle down there inside the hole, until silence. Only the echo of her last scream, fading, vanishing like the flashlight's dying light. Helena ran to the edge, but Yuri grabbed her firmly. "No!" She turned to him furious, tears already beginning to freeze on her face. "We have to go after her!" Leo was shouting too, not knowing whether to cry or run. "We can't just leave her there!" "But Yuri..." He just shook his head with that expression I'll never forget. At this point, she's already dead. Helena broke free from him, even looked down at the hole, but there was no way. It was narrow, deep, and from down there, a sound began to rise. A dragging, heavy, distant, as if that thing was still down there, waiting. We stood there, paralyzed, not knowing what to do. I could feel my heart pounding against my chest, the sweat freezing on my skin, and a brutal certainty. We should never have come in here. Never. The silence that followed, Isabella's scream seemed to suffocate us more than the thin air itself. Helena was still kneeling near the hole, eyes wide open, her breath trembling. Leo was pacing back and forth, kicking the ice, cursing, saying it couldn't be that we had to go after her. "We can't just leave her?" he shouted, pointing his flashlight into the darkness of the hole. "We need to do something." I couldn't even speak. I was just holding the camera, gripping it too tightly, without even knowing why. Helena stood up, staring at Yuri. "So, you're just going to stand there? You're not going to help?" Yuri stayed quiet for a second, looking at the hole as if measuring not just its depth, but the abyss inside it. Then he took a deep breath and spoke. "The Wendigo," he began, with that low voice that somehow seemed to fill the whole cave, "doesn't hunt just out of necessity." We stood there listening, too afraid to interrupt. "It hunts because that's what it is. Hunting is what keeps it alive." Leo, irritated, snapped back, "So what? If it took Isabella, maybe it's satisfied." Yuri slowly turned his head, his eyes heavy with the weight of someone who knows more than they'd like to. "No." He looked at each of us and continued, "Now, we're a threat. We invaded its territory. It will protect it. To the end." We swallowed hard. Helena crossed her arms, trying to hold on to some rationality. "So what are you saying, that it's going to come after us?" Yuri nodded without hesitation. "It won't stop at one prey. It will hunt until it finishes all of us, until there's nothing left, or until we either drive it away or kill it." Leo ran his hands over his face, desperate. "My God!" I, even without fully understanding what Yuri knew, could only ask, "So, what do we do?" Yuri looked around. The darkness of the tunnel seemed even thicker now, and he answered simple, cold. "Either we run, or we fight, but..." He tilted his head slightly, and added, "It already knows we're here, and it knows this place much better than we do." We stood there paralyzed, listening again to that sound. The dragging. Far away, Or maybe not so far after all. And for the first time, even Helena couldn't respond with science or logic. She just stayed silent. And I could only think about Isabella's voice, fading, down there, in the depths of a hole from which no one would ever come back. The vote was over. The three of us, me, Yuri, and Leo, decided to leave. Helena didn't agree, but she had no choice. She just stayed silent, eyes fixed on the ground, chewing on the guilt even before swallowing the defeat. We turned our flashlights back, started walking. The cold felt heavier now. Or maybe it was the fear stuck to our skin like burning ice. The silence was broken only by our footsteps and short breaths. Until that sound. Again. The dry crack. The dragging, the growl. We all turned at the same time. And before we could even scream, it emerged from the darkness, a deformed, skeletal mass, pale, eyes hollow like bottomless pits. The Wendigo. Leo tried to lift his arms, screamed, but the creature lunged at him. In a second, those elongated fingers, or were they claws, tore through his neck. The blood sprayed hot into the freezing air. Helena screamed. Leo fell, his eyes wide open, his body trembling. Then just still. I couldn't move. I could only watch as Yuri lunged forward, pulling from his pocket a knife I didn't even know he had. He threw himself at the creature, driving the blade in with all his strength. The Wendigo let out a roar. Not of pain. Not of fear. Just rage. It tried to break free. But I don't know how. Maybe out of sheer desperation. The two of us jumped in too. I grabbed one of the creature's arms, while Yuri pushed the knife deeper and deeper. The Wendigo's skin was rough, cold, like old leather. It thrashed, twisted, until finally, it stopped. It went still. Collapsed on top of Leo's body. Helena was crying, unable to look. I fell to my knees, gasping, with the taste of blood in my mouth. I don't know if it was his or mine. Yuri stood staring at the fallen creature and whispered. It wasn't the only one. I didn't even understand at first, until we heard it. More sounds, more cracks, more dragging, and then we saw 3, 4, maybe more. Other Wendigos, the hollow eyes, the open mouths. Ready, run! Yuri shouted. And we ran. We ran without looking back, without thinking, just hearing the claws scraping against the walls, the sound of monstrous bodies closing in, and as if the cave itself wanted to swallow us. The walls started collapsing. The ice gave way, rocks and slabs crashing down. The entrance vanished in an avalanche of rock and ice. The three of us fell out the other side, rolling in the cold snow, our breath faltering, our bodies shaking, but alive, just the three of us. Helena, her face covered in tears and blood. Yuri with the knife still in his hand, like an extension of his own arm. And me, with the camera, but with no desire to ever use it again. I never saw Yuri again, or Helena. For a while we exchanged messages, tried to pretend it was just a failed expedition, an accident, but it wasn't. It never was. Today I'm writing this just to try to lift some of the weight, but I know it won't help. The image of Leo, of Isabella, of the Wendigo, it won't leave my mind. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I still hear the cracks, the dragging, and I wonder, did they stay there? Or did they come out? With us?
The cursor blinked on the screen, insistent,
like an intermittent vital sign. The bluish light of the monitor was the only illumination in Jonas Weber's small apartment, buried on the 4th floor of an old building in Kreuzberg, Berlin. Outside, the day was timidly beginning to brighten, but inside, time seemed suspended, or rather, governed only by the intervals between one of Sophie Lane's posts and the next. He leaned over the black-covered notebook, its pages filled with meticulous handwriting, obsessively slanted line after line, dates, times, captions, symbols. As always, he didn't even allow himself a deep breath before recording the essentials. 0832, he wrote. Then he quickly jotted down the description of the new post. Location, cafe. Appears to be Neukölln, possibly Kaffeekranz. Outfit, beige coat, white wool scarf. Expression, slight smile, eyes half closed, comfort, tranquility, surrender. Then he underlined the caption, copying it exactly as she had posted it. Mornings like this, Berlin. For a second he stood still, staring at the words on the paper. The tip of the pencil trembled slightly between his long, pale fingers. A strange warmth spread through his chest, as if she herself had just whispered in his ear. She's calling me, he thought. The beige coat, neutrality, security, purity. The cappuccino cup, always the cappuccino. The silent code they had shared so many times without anyone noticing. And now the confirmation, Berlin. No, it wasn't casual. It never was casual. She wanted him to know she was still in the city. Jonas smirked slightly, running a hand through his blonde, tousled hair, an unconscious gesture. The monitor's glow reflected in his steady, determined gaze. He slid his fingers over the trackpad and enlarged the image, analyzing the background details, the exposed brick wall, the blurred sign, the light wooden chairs. He had already mapped 3 cafes in that area that matched that aesthetic. He turned a page in the notebook and quickly sketched what he remembered from the framing. Thin, almost childlike scribbles, but precise. The position of the cup, the angle of her face, the fold of the coat over her arm. Then, underneath, he wrote, "She wants me to come to her, but not yet. She's preparing the moment." Jonas closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling a shiver run down his spine like an electric wire. On the other side of the city, Sophie Lane was living yet another ordinary day, but for him, this was everything. The invisible thread connecting their existences, stitched between every post, every gesture she displayed to the world without knowing, or perhaps just perhaps knowing all too well. He opened Instagram again and kept staring at her feed, scrolling slowly as if going through an intimate, personal secret album. "Soon," he murmured, as if the word itself carried enough weight to bend time. And then he made the last note of the morning. "She's ready." Berlin's biting cold didn't stop her from going out that morning. Sophie Lane wrapped herself tightly in her beige coat, adjusted the white scarf around her neck, and set off walking through the city's still damp streets, the gray building sketching a fractured horizon above her head. She liked walking alone, getting a little lost, exploring new cafes, new corners. It was a kind of silent ritual amidst the constant noise of social media. The temporary solitude reconnected her with some forgotten part of herself. Her phone vibrated frequently, notifications, likes, messages from followers. She slid her finger across the screen, replied to 2 or 3 comments with automatic emojis, opened the camera, and captured the cappuccino that had just arrived at her table. The perfect foam, the subtle gleam of the handmade ceramic mug. She took the photo, adjusted the lighting, added the filter, smiled to herself, satisfied. She typed, "Mornings like this, Berlin," and posted it. A few minutes later, while absent-mindedly stirring her coffee, she did something she had long promised herself she wouldn't do again. She also shared the location, in real time, Kaffeekranz, Neukölln. Maybe she wanted some friends who lived nearby to see it and show up by surprise. Maybe it was just boredom, the desire to be seen, recognized. She didn't think much about it. She never imagined that, at that exact moment, someone, somewhere in the city, would receive that notification, like a blaring siren, cutting through the morning's chill. She finished her coffee unhurriedly, flipping through a magazine left forgotten on the table beside her. Then she paid, adjusted her scarf again, and set off walking along the busy street, indifferent to the people passing by. She didn't notice the man standing across the street, Jonas. His tousled blonde hair swayed slightly in the sharp breeze, hands buried deep in the pockets of his worn coat, his gaze fixed on her, following every step with surgical precision. There she was, not just on the screen, not just in the scribbled pages of his notebook, but there, breathing, walking, alive. He couldn't move immediately. He just stood there, feeling his heart pounding in his chest, the icy air spasming in and out of his lungs. She kept walking, distracted, crossing the street, pausing briefly to look at a shop window. Jonas took a deep breath, gathered everything he had, or what he thought he had, and began to walk too, slowly keeping his distance, eyes fixed on that figure who, until then, had been made only of pixels, filters, and secret codes. Now she was flesh, bone, and possibility. She had no idea, and he had no intention of letting her get away. She walked distractedly, glancing at shop windows, adjusting her scarf, when she felt a presence approaching from her left. Sophie. The male voice sounded close, almost intimate, even though it was unfamiliar. She turned, surprised, looking at the slender man with delicate features, but something unsettling in his light eyes, hidden beneath messy blonde hair tousled by the wind. "Hi," she replied politely, but her guard was already up. Jonas smiled, like someone reuniting with someone deeply familiar. "I knew I'd find you here today. You like this cafe? You always talk about it on cold mornings, remember? Like that time when you wrote, 'Cappuccino saves even the coldest days.'" Sophie frowned slightly. That phrase, she had posted it months ago, maybe. How did he? "Oh, yeah," she forced a smile, stepping half a pace back, uncomfortable. He didn't notice or didn't want to. "And today?" The beige coat. "You always choose neutral tones when you're feeling more introspective. I understand that. You speak through these things." She took a deep breath, quickly glancing around as if looking for an excuse to escape. "Sorry, I have to go," she said, trying to stay cordial. But her body was already pulling away. She turned to cross the street, quickening her pace. She didn't notice that as she rummaged through her bag. A white cotton handkerchief, delicately embroidered with floral patterns, slipped out and fell onto the sidewalk. Jonas stood still, watching her silhouette disappear, crossing the street, getting lost among the hurried passers-by. The cold no longer seemed to bother him. He slowly crouched down, picked up the handkerchief with reverent care, as if gathering a sacred token of devotion. He brought it to his face, inhaling the soft scent of lavender and coffee. And he stood there motionless, holding the handkerchief, staring at the empty street ahead, his eyes lost, not quite knowing what to make of what had just happened. Why did she speak that way? Why was she so distant? Was it a test, a code? He closed his hand around the handkerchief, pressing it to his chest, his heart racing, torn between the cold rejection and the delirious certainty that somehow that response was also part of the silent game they played. She wanted me to have this. She left it for me. He smiled faintly, staring at the folded fabric between his fingers. She wants me to follow. And then he turned, beginning to walk in the same direction she had gone, his steps growing steadily more determined. Sophie wandered distractedly through the store aisles, a small, quiet boutique hidden down an alley in Berlin. The city was cold, but inside the atmosphere felt calm, warm, with soft lights reflecting off displays of delicate objects and colorful fabrics. She didn't realize, until it was too late, that Jonas was already there. He appeared suddenly between the shelves, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that froze the air. His messy blonde hair, his slim, pale frame, seemed to vibrate at a frequency only he could hear. "Do you remember that day, Sophie?" His voice was low, but filled with a disturbing certainty. "When you wrote, 'Sometimes silence speaks louder than 1,000 words.'" I understood. That was for me. Sophie stood frozen, her heart racing, while her mind tried to process what was happening. "No, I don't know who you are." Her voice came out weak, trembling. He smiled as if hearing an innocent lie. "Of course you do. You call me every day." She tried to take a step back, but he moved with her, subtly blocking the path to the door. Suddenly, Jonas turned his body, walked over to the entrance and, without any rush, reached out to the latch. A dry click echoed through the shop as he locked the door. Sophie ran to it, yanking the handle forcefully, but there was no way out. She turned, pale, her gaze flicking between him and the window, as if she could somehow break through it with sheer desperation. Further inside, the shop's only employee, a young blonde woman, noticed the sudden commotion and approached. "Is everything okay?" she asked, glancing back and forth between Sophie and Jonas. He then calmly turned to the employee, his expression unshaken, his eyes empty, cold. "Are you going to help me? Or are you going to let her run away again?" The employee stopped halfway, confused, hesitant, while Sophie, now pressed against a wall, looked frantically around, searching for any gap, any object, anything. Jonas ran his hand through his hair, took a deep breath, then fixed his gaze back on her, with that look of someone who doubts nothing. "You called me here, I came." The silence in the shop was dense, suffocating, as if the world outside had vanished. I don't know what you're talking about," Sophie stammered, her voice broken by ragged breathing, her body tense like a cornered animal. Jonas tilted his head as if hearing something deeply disappointing, and frowned slightly, taking another step toward her. "Don't lie. You write for me. You always have." His voice lost its forced sweetness and took on a harsh tone, cracked with frustration. Sophie crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her eyes silently pleading for help from the shop assistant, who was hesitating a few steps behind. Suddenly, Jonas lunged and grabbed Sophie's arm forcefully, yanking her roughly. She let out a scream. The assistant rushed over, raising her arms in an attempt to separate them. Jonas turned abruptly like a cornered animal, and in an uncontrolled impulse shoved the assistant violently. Her body was thrown backward off balance, until her head struck the edge of a shelf. A dull thud, and then she collapsed to the floor, motionless. Sophie let out a muffled scream, her hands covering her mouth as she backed away, her eyes wide, fixed on the fallen woman. "My God, you killed her." Sophie's voice was a strained whisper fractured by terror. Jonas stood still for a moment, staring at the assistant's body. Then slowly, he turned back to Sophie, his eyes wide, filled with a feverish excitement. "No, she doesn't matter." He smiled, but it was a broken, crooked, trembling smile. "What matters is, you called me. I read everything. I understood every word." He began pacing back and forth, agitated, his fingers pulling at his own hair, muttering disjointed things. "I knew. When you posted that photo, you said, 'I've never felt so alone.' You wanted me to come, to take you away, to show you that you're not alone." Sophie, paralyzed, her back pressed against the wall, glanced sideways at the assistant's motionless body, tears beginning to stream down her face. Jonas approached and she shrank back even more. "You never answered me." "Never, but I know. I've always known." While he spoke unhinged, a quiet movement happened just a few meters away. The assistant, with a faint groan, regained consciousness. Without Jonas noticing, she slowly turned, feeling the floor, crawling silently toward the bathroom. Sophie saw it but stayed silent, keeping her gaze locked on Jonas, pretending to be completely consumed by fear. The assistant reached the door, slipped inside, and with what little strength she had left, locked herself in, turning the latch with difficulty before sliding down to the floor, gasping for breath. On the other side of the store, Jonas kept muttering, "Everything you write is for me. Only I understand. And now you won't run away anymore." The shop assistant, locked in the bathroom, her hands trembling and her face still damp with blood, could barely hold the phone. Her voice came out in a desperate whisper. On the other side of the store, Jonas suddenly stopped talking, instantly alert. He tilted his head, sniffing at the silence. Where is she?" he asked, his voice thick with suspicion, staring intensely at Sophie. She shook her head, taking a step back. I don't know." Jonas frowned, furious. "Liar!" he shouted, grabbing her arm brutally. Sophie screamed, but he was already yanking her, forcing her to walk through the store in search of the assistant. Then he stopped. He heard it. Behind the bathroom door, muffled, the assistant's weak voice still spoke. "Please, he's here. Send help." Jonas's eyes widened, his breath growing heavy and erratic. He released Sophie's arm and ran to the door, twisting the knob, locked. He started pounding on the wood, screaming, Open this door!" Inside, the assistant only shrank further, trembling, the phone still pressed to her ear. Outside the store, a commotion was already forming, people stopping on the sidewalk, phones raised, cameras recording. The police siren wailed in the distance, then closer, until it stopped right in front of the window. Jonas stopped pounding on the door when he heard the shouts coming from the other side of the glass. "Police! Drop the weapon! Come out with your hands up!" But he had no weapon, only his own hands and a delirious conviction that made him believe he was invincible. He slowly turned, looking at Sophie. She was on her knees in the middle of the store, silently crying, her face completely pale. Jonas walked over to her, knelt down, and cupped her face in his hands with a disturbingly tender gesture. "They won't separate us. You called me here. I came. Now no one will separate us." On the other side of the window, the police were preparing to enter. Jonas embraced her, pulling her tightly against him, and then, in a fit of rage, seized her by the neck, squeezing hard, suffocating her. Sophie struggled, clawed,
tried to scream, but her voice died in her throat. Then suddenly he let her go. Her body collapsed to the floor, motionless. Jonas stood there staring at her with a vacant expression, as if he were finally at peace. The front door burst open with a crash, and the police stormed into the store. "On the ground now!" Jonas didn't even resist. He simply raised his hands, still looking at Sophie, lying on the floor, motionless. One of the officers knelt to check her pulse, shouting, "She's alive! Weak pulse! She needs immediate medical attention." Meanwhile, Jonas was handcuffed, pushed out of the store, under the flashes of cameras and the shouts of the crowd. From the bathroom, the assistant finally emerged, supported by another officer, in a state of shock. Days later, Sophie woke up from the coma in the hospital. Her image was plastered across newspapers and websites. The blogger who survived her stalker. The case became a symbol of the need for safety for digital influencers. Soon after she released the book, Survive My Story, it became an instant bestseller. Interviews, book tours, packed audiences. And across the city, in a cold cell, Jonas read every page with devotion, his eyes hungry, interpreting each paragraph as a secret confession. "I knew. You wrote it for me. You want me to wait. I will wait." He closed the book slowly, a crooked smile on his lips, and whispered to himself, "In 15 years, we'll be together. I know it." And then he closed his eyes, comforted by the only certainty that had never abandoned him. The crackle of the battery-powered radio blended with the soft popping of the campfire. In the middle of the clearing, a thick log burned, spitting out small flames that cast tall, flickering shadows through the trees. The metallic sound of Sweet Dreams Are Made of This by eurythmics filled the air, mixed with the sweet smell of marshmallows roasting on the tips of makeshift sticks. "This is the dumbest hangout I've ever agreed to," Jade said, crossing her arms and blowing cigarette smoke without looking at anyone. "And yet here you are," Rick replied, reaching out for another beer from the open cooler. He winked at Lena, who smiled and rested her head on his shoulder as the firelight reflected in her eyes. "Just want to say," Sam began, with the marshmallow stick in his mouth, "I haven't hooked up with anyone here yet." Mia rolled her eyes, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. "Classy, Sam." Ben let out a nervous laugh and looked around, as if the forest might laugh back. "Guys, you really know the story about this place, right?" Rick bit into his marshmallow, burning the roof of his mouth, and grumbled, "Here we go." Ben adjusted the flashlight at his feet, just to have something to hold. "They say that a long time ago there was a guy who worked here, back when this was still a real campground. Jonas Faraz," Mia finished. Without lifting her eyes from the map, she was sketching in her notebook, under the dim light. Silence spread, broken only by the radio tape starting to sputter before coming back with another song, Africa by Toto. "Yeah, that's him," Ben continued, his voice lower. "They say he took care of the boats, cleaned the bathrooms, until, well, they accused him of killing a girl." "That's awful," Lena murmured, shrinking deeper into her denim jacket. "But it wasn't him, right?" Sam asked, now a bit more sober. Mia closed the notebook, looking around, her expression neutral. "No one knows. Just that he disappeared, or they made him disappear." The fire crackled loudly, like a sudden burst of laughter. "And?" Jade teased, raising an eyebrow. Ben took a deep breath. "And they say that every Friday the 13th, he comes back to kill anyone who dares set foot here." Sam raised his arms as if summoning a spirit. "Oh, I'm shaking." The others laughed, even though Lena clutched Rick's arm tighter, and Ben glanced again into the darkness. Rick stood up, stretching his muscles. "Total bullshit. The only thing that's gonna kill us here is warm beer and burnt marshmallows." He stuck a branch into the fire, lifting a black, steaming piece of marshmallow. "Miss this, Sam," he teased, tossing the smoldering treat in his direction, and Sam dodged it with an exaggerated yell. Everyone burst out laughing. The radio switched tracks on its own, letting out a metallic hiss before the raspy voice of "White Wedding" by Billy Idol filled the clearing. The shadows stretched even longer. The wind shifted, blowing the smoke straight toward them. Sam stood up, waving his hands in front of his face. I'm gonna go take a piss." He grabbed the flashlight and walked toward the trail, the beam of light cutting through the tree trunks. "Be careful, Jonas is watching," Jade shouted, raising her beer in a mocking toast. "Fuck Jonas," Sam replied, disappearing into the night, while the music and the crackle of the battery-powered radio carried on, relentless. The campfire crackled again. Ben looked at the same spot where Sam had vanished, bit his lip and said nothing. Mia drew another straight line on the map without lifting her eyes. The flames twisted, lighting up the tall trees that deep in the background seemed to have shifted a little. But no one noticed. The radio hissed, swallowed by its own interference, until it died with a dry click. The fire, once alive, was now just embers and smoke, releasing a weak warmth that barely held off the cold creeping through the trees. Sam wasn't coming back. "He's taking a while, huh?" Jade said without much conviction, staring at the almost warm beer in her hand. Mia looked up from the map, which now seemed useless. She checked her wristwatch. 20 minutes. Ben rubbed his hands together, staring fixedly at the point where Sam had disappeared, as if waiting could somehow bring him back. "I think I'm gonna go check," Ben said, standing up slowly. Rick grabbed him by the arm. "Don't be an idiot." The guy just went to piss, but no one laughed. Lena curled deeper into her jacket, rubbing her arms as if the cold had suddenly doubled. The wind made the treetops whisper like a warning. "Sam!" Mia shouted, her voice cutting an uncertain path through the forest. No answer. Just the sharp snap of a branch either too far away or too close. Ben grabbed the flashlight. "Seriously, I'm going." Mia stood up too, pulling up her hood. "I'm coming with you." Rick scoffed, staying beside Lena and Jade, who just watched as the two vanished among the trees. The trail was damp, covered with dead leaves that sank beneath their feet. The flashlight's beam traced uncertain shapes, tree trunks looking like endless columns, branches like arched hands. "Sam?" Ben called out once more. Nothing, just the muffled sound of water. The lake nearby. Mia quickened her pace, her heart pounding, not from exhaustion but from the silence. The forest was too quiet. And then to the right, between two thick trees, something gleamed. "There?" Mia pointed, the flashlight trembling in her hand. Ben swallowed hard, moving closer. A sneaker. Upside down, soaked, half sunken in a murky puddle of mud. "Sam?" Ben whispered as if his friend might be hiding behind some tree trunk, laughing at his own prank. Mia crouched, nudged the sneaker with the tip of a stick, and then she saw it. The other foot bare up ahead, pale and motionless, half buried under leaves. They followed the misshapen line until the flashlight beam revealed the body. Sam was lying on his side, one arm outstretched, his eyes locked on something far above or far away. His chest torn open, as if something had ripped through it, not cut. Ben screamed, the sound shattering the brutal silence of the woods. Mia staggered back, tripping over a root and falling onto her back. No, no, no! Ben pulled her up, forcing her to her feet, and they both ran without even thinking, heading back the way they'd come. The trees seemed closer now, choking the trail. The campfire appeared suddenly like a weak beacon. Jade, Rick, and Lena stood up as they saw the two of them sprinting toward them, terror written all over their faces. "What happened?" Rick shouted, confused. Mia was gasping for breath, unable to speak. Ben turned, pointing toward the trail, his hands shaking. Sam, he... Before he could finish, the forest behind them answered. A dull crack, like the weight of a foot crushing leaves. Then another, louder. Everyone went silent, their eyes fixed on the dense darkness where the trail disappeared. Nothing appeared, but no one could move anymore. Only the wind spinning the warm smoke of the campfire, which now seemed ready to die out for good. The sound of branches snapping was the last thing she heard from him. Rick let go of her hand so forcefully she almost fell backward. "No," Lena screamed, reaching out, but he was already running, disappearing into the darkness of the woods, the branches closing behind him. She screamed again, but only silence answered. For a second, she stood there, frozen, unable to understand. How could he? Her legs trembled, her chest burned, and the scream caught in her throat turned into a sob. Ben rushed over, grabbing her by the arm. "Lena, we don't have time for this now." Mia, behind them, was looking around, eyes wide, trying to figure out where the next sound would come from. Jade whispered, almost voiceless, "Move!" But Lena didn't. He left me." Ben gripped her tightly. "Go!" She stumbled, but let herself be pulled along, the tears stinging her eyes. They ran gasping, their feet sinking in the mud, the branches scraping their arms. And then, silence. They stopped among the trees, hidden behind a massive trunk, breathing like they were swallowing their own fear. Only the sound of leaves stirred by the wind and the hiss of some stubborn cricket, oblivious to the tragedy. Ben leaned on his knee, trying to catch his breath. Then he looked up and said, almost to himself, I know this guy." The others looked at him. Mia frowned. "What?" He swallowed hard, staring at the ground covered in leaves. "The story. It's the story of the man who was condemned." Jade shrank further into herself, hugging her own body. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath, the words coming out in broken pieces. "They accused him, said he killed a girl from this town. They convicted him, and then they found out it was someone else." Silence seemed to swallow everything for a moment. Only the sound of a leaf falling. Lena, still out of breath, stammered, And what happened to him?" Ben looked around as if the past were right there in the trees. They said they killed him, that the whole town gathered and hunted him down in the forest." He paused. And then, even quieter, my uncles. They were part of it. The conviction and the hunt. His gaze got lost in the dark. But they never found the body. The wind blew cold, making the leaves shiver in a whisper. And then, a snap. In the distance. The sound familiar. Something dragging, heavy, across the wet leaves. Snap. Everyone froze. The sound coming from the right or the left. Impossible to tell. And then he appeared, emerging from the shadows between the trees. So slowly, it felt like time stopped with each step. The same old torn coveralls, skin scarred by years of pain and hatred. In his hand, the axe, dragging along the ground, leaving a trail of cut leaves and broken branches. Mia whispered, breathless, "Oh my God." Ben pulled them all back, but the space was tight, surrounded by dense forest. Jade tripped over a root and fell on her back, her scream caught in her throat. The man didn't even speed up. He took 2 more steps, raised the axe with a macabre slowness, as if there was no need to run, as if he knew she had nowhere to go. Jade screamed, "Help me!" Mia ran to pull her up, but Ben grabbed her arm tightly. The axe came down, a dull sound like wood splitting, and the scream stopped abruptly. Her body stayed there, sprawled between roots and moss. Lena let out a sob and Mia covered her mouth, desperate. The man raised the axe again, dripping with blood, and took another step. "Run!" Ben shouted, pulling them both. They stumbled through the forest, branches slashing their faces, their breath ragged and uneven. But the sound, it was still there. The dragging of the axe, relentless, slow, but always coming. Suddenly, Ben stopped, turned eyes wide, and yelled, "Enough!" He grabbed a thick branch from the ground, lifting it like a spear. Mia screamed. He charged, shouting with all the strength he had left, "Come on, you bastard!" The man didn't even pause. He took a step. Another. Ben swung the branch, aiming at the man's chest. The branch snapped in half on impact with his arm, as if it were paper. The man raised his good arm and... A punch, dry and brutal. Ben flew backwards, hitting the ground with a dull thud. The air knocked out of his lungs. He tried to get up, but the man was already over him. He raised the axe. Mia and Lena stood frozen, eyes wide in horror. The axe came down. Again. Silence. Only the sound of the axe being pulled back, and the dragging starting again. Mia whispered, her voice broken. "It's no use." Lena shook her head, trembling. We can't." Mia pulled her. Just run." And then they ran again. This time without looking back, without even thinking about fighting, because now they knew it was useless. Fighting him was just a faster way to die. The 2 of them ran, breath tearing through their chests, feet stumbling over roots. Lena held Mia's arm, pulling, leading, but they both knew they couldn't run forever. Suddenly, Mia stopped, eyes wide. "The keys!" Lena turned, confused. "What?" "The car keys. They're in my bag," she shouted, breathless. They stood there staring at each other, pupils dilated with fear. Lena stammered, They're back at the camp." Mia nodded, barely able to breathe. "And if we go, he'll get us." Lena bit her lip hard, her face wet with sweat and tears. "If we don't, He'll get us anyway. A second, just 1 second, and then they started running back. Branches smacked their faces, cut their skin, but they didn't feel it anymore. Only panic, burning like fire inside their chests. They reached near the clearing. The camp was still there. The tents, the extinguished fire, and Mia's bag lying next to a log. Lena pointed. There! They started running, but a branch snapped to the right. Both turned at the same time. And he was there, emerging from the trees, faster now, more determined, as if he knew the hunt was almost over. He raised the axe, and threw it. The air sliced with a deadly whistle. Mia managed to dive to the side, but the blade grazed her arm, tearing a deep cut, blood splattering over her ripped shirt. She screamed, hitting the ground. The axe got stuck in a tree, the blade buried in the trunk. Lena grabbed Mia by the collar of her shirt. She pulled her up, helping her stand, and they both ran, stumbling toward the bag. Mia almost fell again, blood dripping from her arm, but she managed to unzip it with a trembling hand. "Find it, now!" Lena screamed, looking back. The man was walking, calm, unhurried as always. He just yanked the axe out of the tree with a sharp motion, the wood creaking, and kept walking. Mia screamed, "I got it!" The key gleamed in her bloodied hand. They both bolted toward the car across the camp, tripped over marshmallow remnants, empty cans, open backpacks. They reached the car. Lena grabbed the handle, yanked it, but someone was already inside. Rick! He was there, hunched over in the driver's seat, forehead sweaty, fumbling to fit some key, trembling. His eyes widened when he saw them. Lena froze. You came to escape, alone." Her voice broke, more from rage than pain. Rick stammered, I thought you were dead." Lena stepped closer. "You left me." Mia, behind her, pressed her bleeding arm, too weak to speak. Rick opened the door, stepped out, hand extended. "Give me the key. Come on, we can all go." But then, the sound. Behind him, Lena's eyes went wide. He turned. The man was there, silent, unrelenting. The axe raised slowly, as it always did. Rick spun back to them, desperate. "Give me the key. Let's go." Mia clutched the key tight, trembling, tears mixing with the blood. Lena looked at him, at the man, at the car, and understood. Either they ran, or no one left. Rick took another step. "Let's go." Lena stared into his eyes, full of fear, then at Mia, who just shook her head, eyes brimming with tears. And then the man struck. Rick's body hit the ground hard, a hollow sound, blood slowly spreading through the damp earth. Lena and Mia froze for a second, only hearing his breath, and the man's footsteps already coming again. Lena grabbed Mia's arm. "Come on!" They shoved him aside, clambered into the car. Mia jammed the key into the ignition with trembling hands, turned it. The car roared to life, the engine screaming through the forest. Lena shouted, "Go!" The man slammed against the door, but Mia was already flooring it. The car shot forward, kicking up dust, skidding along the narrow trail. Trees blurred past, branches slapping the windshield. Mia cried, grunted in pain, one hand pressed to the wound on her arm. Lena looked. Are you okay?" Mia just shook her head, then looked down at her arm and froze. The blood was already darkening. It wasn't normal. It wasn't just a cut, the skin around it, black, hard, cold, as if it was dying. And even with the engine roaring, even with the bumpy road, she heard it, his breathing. Inside her head, she looked in the rearview mirror. Nothing. But the sound was there. Lena saw her look. "What is it?" Mia didn't answer. She just pressed her arm harder, gritting her teeth. The car sped down the winding road, but Mia could barely see anymore. Her vision blurry, like she was sinking into dark water. The wound spread through her skin, pulsing. Lena looked out the window. There's a fork up ahead. But Mia couldn't focus. The car skidded, and then suddenly, a sharp impact. The car lurched forward, trees swallowing everything. Metal twisted. Glass shattered. The world went silent. For a few seconds, only the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. Lena was slumped over the wheel, blood trickling from her temple. She wasn't breathing anymore. Mia stayed there, her head slumped to the side, her arm dead black as coal, and her vision focused for 1 second on the rearview mirror, and there he was, emerging from the forest, silent, walking without hurry, the same calm as always, like he had all the time in the world. And in fact, he did. The car was there, lifeless, metal wedged into the tree. Mia was already unconscious. Fate had done him the favor of delivering the ending on a silver platter. A brutal irony. No matter how much they ran, how much they fought, the ending was always inevitable. And he knew that. As he approached, steady and silent, it was late afternoon and Miguel was driving alone down the dirt road, the tires kicking up small clouds of dust as the sky darkened slowly. He was tired but satisfied. The day had been good. He spent the afternoon at a friend's house, having a barbecue, drinking some beers and talking about old stories from the countryside. As he drove, he thought about how nice it would be to get home, take a hot shower and rest. He was lost in these thoughts when something broke the quiet. A strange sound, a muffled roar coming from his right. Miguel looked automatically to the pasture. There, he saw a group of cows. They were mooing strangely, loud and aggressive, as if provoked. One of them especially stopped and stared fixedly at the car with glazed eyes, as if it was going to charge. Miguel gripped the steering wheel tighter, uncomfortable, and looked away, accelerating slightly. A few meters ahead, he turned on the radio, trying to relax. The music began to play softly, filling the car cabin, but suddenly, without him touching anything, the stations started changing by themselves. First classical music, then a strong static, then a voice whispering something unintelligible, until the radio went completely silent, leaving only weak static. Miguel frowned and turned the knob, trying to regain the frequency, but nothing happened. It was then that out of nowhere, an animal the size of a deer ran right in front of the car. "Shit!" Miguel shouted. Slamming on the brakes, the car skidded on the loose, jerked but managed to stop just in time. Miguel stayed still for a few seconds, panting, and looked around. Worried, he checked if he was hurt and his heart was still racing. But he was fine. The animal disappeared quickly into the vegetation, as if it had never been there. Miguel took a deep breath, trying to calm down, but a strange feeling of alertness began to settle in his chest. And then, a few meters ahead, in the middle of the thickening fog, he saw him, standing right in the middle of the road. A man motionless, head bowed. Miguel slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding. The man didn't move. He wore an old, wrinkled, dark suit and a hat that partially hid his face. Miguel looked out the passenger window, trying to make out the strange figure. When the man lifted his head, he revealed a pale, almost translucent face with deep, empty eyes that seemed not to see the world, but that stared fixedly at him. A chill ran down Miguel, his spine. He gripped the steering wheel tightly and, on impulse, sped away, leaving that sinister presence behind on the empty road. As the car disappeared around the curve, he looked in the rearview mirror and saw that the man was still there, motionless, as if he belonged to the fog that was starting to swallow the road. Miguel never forgot that encounter, nor the silence that followed. Clara was never the type to use dating apps. She preferred books, series, and deep conversations. But the pandemic changed everything. Long days of lockdown made her routine unbearable. Alone, unable to go out, she decided to download the app, just to talk. She got some matches, but the conversations were all shallow, empty. Hey, beautiful, wanna break quarantine? What's your favorite lingerie color? She sighed, tired. Until one night, a new match. His name was Lucas. He seemed different. In his bio, I love philosophy, literature, and good conversations. Clara smiled and started the conversation. Days passed, and the talks with Lucas became an essential part of her routine. They talked about Nietzsche, Camus, about loneliness, about how the world felt different after isolation. Clara found herself laughing alone at his smart and witty replies. Sometimes her heart raced when she got a new message, but she always wondered, am I feeling this way just because of the isolation? After so many conversations, Lucas invited her to meet. It was a remote outdoor place, safe. Clara spent minutes staring at her wardrobe. So long without going out, she mostly wore pajamas or dressy tops for online meetings. She finally chose light blue jeans, a white tank top, and comfortable sneakers. Her heart was tight with anxiety. On the way, she thought, will he like me in person? At the park, she took a deep breath. The place was quiet, surrounded by tall trees and hidden trails. Then she heard, Clara? She turned. There was Lucas, just like in the photos, or even more handsome. They walked and talked, laughed. But Clara started to notice he knew too many details about her. Habits, preferences, things she didn't remember telling him. When she asked, did you look me up? He just smiled, without answering. Suddenly her phone vibrated. She looked at the screen. You matched with Lucas. Clara froze, looked ahead, but he was gone. The park was empty. She started walking fast, looking around until she saw, among the trees, a hidden trail. She followed almost without noticing, until she reached an old tombstone covered in moss. The inscription read, Lucas Almeida. The world seemed to stop. 2018, But then her phone vibrated again. She looked trembling. It was great meeting you, Clara. Until next time. Clara dropped the phone and ran. On the cracked phone screen, abandoned on the ground. The message still glowed. And remember, not every match is what it seems.